I'm skipping Locha just because I have Jeopard and he is 100 times better than any healing character in the game, and overall you don't need to use abundance characters if you have a preservation character, and this is an exaggerated form of a quote which I've been seeing lots of times since we've got Locha announced as 1.1 character. So in this video I decided to compare those two paths, which some people consider really similar, though first of all I want to warn you that we are doing this video based only on 2 released abundance characters plus 1 which is about to be released, and 3 preservation characters we currently have in the game. And of course, the moment we get any additional abundance characters or preservation characters, this might really change depending on what those future potential shielding characters will do. So keep that in mind. If you're watching this video after maybe 1.5, it might be completely irrelevant. So without further ado, taking this into account, let's jump right into it. And first of all, I want to give a really short explanation why we at all want to use sustain characters, because this is a turn-based game, and no matter how much speed and damage you have, you can't avoid or evade enemies' attacks. So at some point of the battle, you will anyway have to tank lots of strong hits from the enemies, and of course it will be much easier when you can either shield or heal your characters. And since we've already found a common ground between those two paths being just a sustain role, let's name 2 other similarities these two paths have. The first one is skill point generation. Both those 2 classes have a really strong focus on their basic attack being the most used action, just because their skills most of the time are situational. You can't just deal plain damage with those, while with basic attack you can. That's why both of those paths are really good skill point generators for our main DPS characters, or maybe for our Harmony supportive characters. And also we can find a similarity in providing supportive buffs for our team, though it will depend on the characters. Some of those characters are providing stuff like debuff removals and damage reduction no matter of what their path is, but I really think it more depends on the character than on the path. But those are actually the only similarities we have between those 2 paths, and now let's get to differences, starting from the fundamental one, though not the most important one. Of course, with abundance characters we are healing, while with preservation characters we are shielding. Why this is important? Because with healing usually we can't go over our max HP, while with shielding we can't usually restore our HP, which means if at some point of the game we got to 100 HP, no matter how much shields we are getting, if at some point our shield will be broken and we will lose our last 100 HP, the character will be knocked down. This again is a fundamental difference, but not the most important one, because again those are usual scenarios, but we already have an exception, Face of Bailu, which can overheal with her healing even though it's not a shield. That's why I don't think that this is the most important one, but of course it was important to mention this. The next really big thing is what we are scaling from with our shields and healing, because for healing it's usually HP, but also sometimes might be attack if they don't change Locha that much, while with shields we are usually scaling from defense, which is really important because at the start of the game, if you are talking about raw stats of the characters, HP and attack usually is better, but if we are talking about potential rise of stats with relics, for example, then defense might be better stat to scale from. The next really big difference is that healing is reactive while shielding is proactive, which means with healing, again, usually we have an exceptions, but usually we can't heal before taking damage. We have to wait until enemy lands some really strong hits on our units and then we can heal. While with shield, it's quite the opposite. We want to apply our shield before we are taking damage, otherwise what's the point of the shield if we are already low on the HP? And this is a really big difference, because if with healing it's really simple to manage your skill points on your healing characters, you just use your basic attacks until the moment when you see that your characters are low on HP. With shielding it's a bit less, we can say, intuitive, because people are sometimes just spamming with March 7th shield because it's not healing, you can shield anytime you want, and it even deals some damage indirectly with her passive. So time to time, if you are not aware of how to use preservation characters, you might just lose much more skill points than if you use abundance character. And since shielding, as we already discussed, is not interacting with our HP directly, we also have a really good advantage of technically not getting damage on the characters which are under the shields, of course, if they are not broken. It's really important, for example, for Yanqing, because this character relies on not taking damage, and if you're getting lots of shields on this character, then he won't physically take damage unless the shield is broken. This is really important, as well as taunting mechanic, even though it's really specific for this game. We have a really good taunt, for example, which Fire MC has when you just apply the debuff on the enemies, which requires them to attack this exact unit, while we have a bit specific taunting mechanic when we're not taunting, we are increasing the chance to be attacked, and the most annoying part is this chance is still a chance, and you might face the situation when you had created all the conditions to be attacked exactly with your preservation characters, but still receive some damage on other characters, which is really annoying. But anyway, this taunt mechanic and the privilege of preservation characters of having this mechanic is really important and worth mentioning. Now, when we found all differences and similarities between those two paths, let's make some pros and cons conclusion. So with healing characters, they are much easier to build because they depend on HP usually, and sometimes attack, which is much easier stats to build up, and also they are much easier to use because they are simply intuitive. You heal only when you need to heal, when you see that your characters are about to die. And even more important, at least for now, for all three of healing characters, we have some similar mechanics which are made in a bit different ways, which we can explain like, bro, you don't care about your character's HP? Okay, fine, then I'll just heal them myself, but now pay attention to your character's HP, I'm not doing this all the time. But of course, this trait of abundance characters being straightforward healers, which can sometimes remove your debuffs, makes them not that wide in terms of use cases. I mean, their main purpose and most important one, of course, is just to simply heal. While for preservation characters, it's really completely different. We can say even opposite, because they are much harder to build exactly, because again, they depend on defense. You have to build up a proper relic set. Then we, of course, might have a much wider spectrum of use cases for our preservation characters in comparison with abundance characters, though you still have to keep in mind that the main purpose is still the same. You just have to keep your characters alive. And now you might say, with all of those differences and similarities defined, we can easily say what path is better for everything in the game, and I'll say no. We have still to make some frames in which we compare those characters. I just selected those 3 frames, so we are comparing the characters from perspective of farming and just daily routine. We are comparing the characters in terms of story and simulated universe, and also we are comparing the characters in terms of memory of chaos. Though, first of all, I want to say that currently in the game, when we're on levels 60 to 70, it's much better to just combine those 2 paths in one team. You don't have to choose one specifically, because at least for now, before level 80 or maybe 90, you are not that confident in killing all the enemies in practically 2 turns. That's why it's much better to just guarantee yourself to not die from the enemy. Of course, this might change in the future, and even now for some activities it's much better to use one specific path, not to slow down your team with using both preservation and healing characters. So that's why we created those frames, and the first one is of course our daily routine and farming. And in this type of activities you usually just want to consecutively farm some stages, not caring about your health on your character, not caring about some character is about to die. And of course, the most important, usually on those types of activities, we are using AI auto battle, and that's why I think it's much better to use abundance characters, first of all because you don't have to care about your HP between the stages, and also because even if AI is a bit dumb, it doesn't care about your characters dying. For the abundance characters, you have those safety mechanisms, so they will prevent your characters from dying and wasting your time on recharging your characters, reviving your characters. With shielding characters, I think it's a bit worse, just because first of all, AI might start using too much skills from your preservation characters, even though they are not that useful. While with abundance characters, unless your units are losing HP, they just usually generate your skill points by giving the plain attacks, which is much better both in terms of damage that they deal and in terms of skill points which they generate for your main DPS characters and supportive characters to finish those stages faster. Now let's get to simulated universe and story, and here I think the situation is a bit different to just routine farming, because here we usually have ability to heal between battles, between stages, depending on what we are going through. And the other more important thing is that usually the important battles like boss battles or elite enemies in simulated universe, for example, we are going through manually, but again, it really depends on the stage. if you have to choose only one type of character and if you want to be a bit faster and you're confident that you anyway will finish this stage, then using preservation character might be a bit better. But if for a simulated universe you just want to go on full auto, it more is like a farming, that's why I recommend you using just an abundance character. And if you're talking about really strong bosses in the story which you struggle with, then of course it will be better to just use both preservation and abundance characters in one team. And now we get to memory of chaos, which lots of people recognize as an ultimate defining factor of what path is better. And here the answer is really simple. There is no better path for memory of chaos, just simply because of the rules. The rules are meant to destroy the dominance of one specific path. For example, currently we have the rule which appreciates using erudition and hunt characters. Does this mean that our destruction characters are worse damage dealers? Of course not, but due to all the advantages which those rules give us, we of course are using hunt and erudition characters, and exactly the same I'm sure will apply when we get any new, for example, preservation character. The same month there might be a rule which decreases damage taken for shielded allies by 50% or 60%, and exactly the same might apply when we get a new abundance character. Maybe even during Locha we will get some kind of this, when for example you heal and you get additional damage or additional attack for your characters. So just because of this factor we can't say that any of those paths are better, and for example preservation can completely overshine abundance characters. Though if we just want to theorize a bit, what path will be more valuable and more preferable in future, for example when we get level 80 or 90, then of course due to the fact that we have to finish the fight in exact amount of turns, our shielding characters might be a bit more interesting, but again it's only theorizing, and I'm sure that abundance characters are really good. You don't have to just ignore abundance characters, for example, because you have Geopard. This really depends on the situation, and again, I gave you examples when abundance characters are simply better than preservation characters. Again, that's only my opinion, and that doesn't mean that you have to hunt for every abundance character you see in the game and summon for them, but overall you don't have to sleep on those characters. They are really valuable, and if you don't agree with my opinion, feel free to share in the comment section what you think about abundance and preservation characters. Also, don't forget about leaving likes and maybe subscribing to the channel if you think that my videos are useful or maybe just interesting for you. And that's all for now. Thanks for your attention and see you soon.